Video, we're going to be talking about ombuds and how they relate in institutions to resolving disputes. I have two special guests, Liz Schwartz, Hill and David Schwartz, and no, they are not related. We're going to be talking about institutional ombuds and where they fit in the general scheme of resolving disputes within an organization. Are there different types of ombuds? Are they different from mediators? And as I said, my special guests are Liz Schwartz Hill and David Schwartz. Let me tell you a little bit about Elizabeth. Elizabeth is the Associate Director for the University of Colorado Boulder Ombuds Office and has served both as a classical ombuds and organizational ombuds for the last 15 years. You'll see more of her information later on in the video. Also, David Schwartz has a PhD. He has served as a faculty member at UNLV since 2001, earning his tenure in 2006. He is now a full professor since 2013. In addition to his current role as UNLV Ombuds, he is also an affiliate professor in the Department of History. Me, of course, my name is Howard Klein. I am a mediator, an arbitrator, and I have been a California licensed attorney since 1976. So, without further ado, let's get into the video and find out what an ombuds, ombuddies, ombudsman, ombudswoman, ombudsperson, what they all are, because most of us have heard it but have never really fully understood what it is. On to the video. So Liz, why don't you start out by explaining what an ombuds is, or an institutional ombuds, if there's a difference.
Well, there is a difference. And I think what I'd like to start is just kind of, like you said, giving a little bit about the origin of the name and a little bit of the history. And then we can dive into, what's an organizational ombuds? Because as I'm going to talk about, there's different models, and I think David's going to flesh those out for us a bit. But as you've noted, the term ombuds, ombudsman is kind of a name that people, or a term that people aren't familiar with. And that's probably in part because it's a Scandinavian word. It has Old Norse origins. And if you were to look at the history of the word, it really means representative, which for many purposes is not really representative, so to speak, of what we do today as an organizational ombuds. And we'll get more into that. So nowadays, there are a number of different titles that you'll hear, and I'm sure today we'll use them interchangeably. But you may hear ombuds, you may hear ombudsman, you may hear ombudsperson, among others. And I'll just say that our International Ombuds Association has officially adopted the term ombuds. Other ombudsman associations have not, and some feel very strongly about maintaining the original word ombudsman, even though there's debate around gender and inclusivity issues. So I'll just put that out there. So you'll hear different terms, but an ombudsman, the role as a representative, was first established back in Sweden in 1713, and it was really created to respond to public complaints that were against the government or government actions to protect citizens from abuses. In 1809, the role was actually codified in the Swedish Constitution, and it was deemed to serve as an agent of justice for the common man. So that's kind of the real start to the profession. We started seeing ombuds here in the US in the 1950s and 60s, and then in the 70s, the US embraced the idea of an advocate ombuds, and this is what we see now in long-term care institutions. We have an advocate long-term care ombudsman. And now that's federally required in every state. So we can talk about the evolution more, but I just wanted to give you kind of that high-level overview of how it's kind of developed here in the U.S. And we see a variety of different programs now, all different kinds of models across different sectors. And I don't know what David would say about this, but I think we're seeing a heightened use and implementation of these programs, and I expect that it'll continue to expand over time.
Yeah, as Liz was saying, organizational, which is really an informal, independent ombuds, is really just one model out of many. When a lot of people think of ombuds, they'll think of the classical ombud, somebody who investigates, receives complaints. That was originally the Scandinavian model, definitely more popular in Europe these days than in the US, although some states do have it. Advocate ombuds, of course, is also big. You'll see that often in healthcare, places like that. You also may have an executive ombuds, which would be with usually a state legislature or a national legislature, there to bring concerns that citizens have, that people have about government policy. And the other place where people might hear the word ombuds is in media ombuds. So a newspaper or media organization could have an ombuds who are really there to get complaints from people in the public about the coverage of the organization. So those are
Oh,
some major types of ombuds.
we may be skipping a bit, but after listening to you, we say we've got ombuds and people can complain to someone. But what does an ombuds do? Do they just, now we may be stepping out of the organization of our outline, but other than receive the complaints, what do they do? Do they solve the complaints? And at least at this stage, try not to cross over between mediation and ombuds, because we can then talk about what the difference is. So, what does an ombuds actually do other than fielding complaints?
Well, interestingly enough, as an organizational ombuds, I wouldn't even say that I receive complaints because under my charter, I am not authorized to receive formal notice on behalf of the university that I work for. So basically, number one thing that I'm there to do is to listen, is to give people a place to be heard. A lot of times they have an issue, they don't know where to go, they don't know what options they have. So an organizational ombuds can help them run through their options. So let's say somebody gets their annual evaluation and isn't happy with it. Well, if they go to their boss or their boss's boss, that's formal. Oh, now they know I complained. Instead, they might want to talk to a neutral third party and say, well, what options do I have or what can I do? So basically, what a lot of what I do is about helping people make better informed choices. Also as an organizational ombuds, I won't advocate for individuals, but I will give them tools to help them advocate better for themselves. And Liz, I'm sure you've got a ton to add as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, that's great. Thanks, David. That's a good start. I too am an organizational ombuds now, and as David mentioned, there's different kinds. I was a classical ombuds first, so I do have some experience in that role as well. But as David's saying, as organizational ombuds, when people come to us, yes, I'll just reiterate to really listen and really help them dig into what's going on, what do they really want, right? And that then helps inform what options we might discuss. If they want to be able to, if they want to be empowered to go and address a situation, we might help them navigate resources. We might help them navigate the bureaucracy of the organization that we're in to help them get to that end goal, that end result, right? But other service we can provide besides listening is we can intervene. So some of the options might be some kind of intervention. Now, of course, because of our confidentiality, which we haven't really gotten into, we would not do that unless they give us express permission and we agree, or unless there's an imminent risk of physical harm to them or to someone else. But we can intervene in a variety of ways. We can do what we call shuttle diplomacy, which is going back and forth between people to try to kind of grease the wheel, so to speak, and get to the point where maybe they can have their own conversation or they can resolve it themselves once we kind of, share information and increase some mutual understanding and develop some common ground for them. We can also surface and escalate issues up the chain of command, because while organizational ombuds have no formal power or authority or decision making, we can help get the information to the people that do. So we build relationships throughout our organization so that when we go to a leader within an organization, they listen, they want to hear what we have to bring to them. We have the credibility, we have the trust, and we can do that without revealing the source, without the name. So people can maintain anonymity by going through an ombuds and surfacing issues, maybe even just getting clarification around policies, procedures, because they don't want to be seen as, kind of ruffling feathers or or waving the flag, we can go and get that information and bring it back. We can also do mediation, which we will talk about more. And we also do a lot of not all ombuds are the same. Not all ombuds will do mediation. Not all ombuds do presentations or workshops. But I think David and I are similar in that we do a lot of that. So, going out there, providing workshops, helping educate people and giving them the skills and tools they need to resolve their own issues, right, early and at the informal level. That's really the goal. I really consider organizational ombuds, like an early dispute resolution technique or model. But we can also be a strategy partner for the leadership, right? Leaders come to us too as a sounding board, and we can really help them, coach them and help them think through strategies of how to address something or how to resolve things that they may be dealing with. So lots of different facets to what we do. I kind of like one of my colleagues mentioned, gosh, ombuds are like a Swiss Army knife, and it's true. We have lots of different tools that we can pull out depending on the situation and what we need. So I don't know, David, anything that I missed that you're thinking of now that you want to add?
Yeah, I will say I do a ton of workshops. I really do like that. And it really is one of the big things that I do, where it's just everything conflict resolution, communication. And usually, I would say many of the times, the issue, unless it's a process issue, comes down to communication. Because at the end of the day, if they could talk with each other, they would talk about the issue. They wouldn't be bringing it to someone else. So a lot of times what we're doing is helping people communicate with each other more confidently and better.
Oh, no, I was just going to say one of our colleagues, who's also an organizational ombuds, really uses a great framework for describing what ombuds do. And she says, and her name is Jessica Kucha-Miller. And David, I don't know if you've heard her talk about this, but she compartmentalizes our work into we facilitate, we navigate, we illuminate, and we educate. And I think that's really great because all the things that we do kind of fall nicely into those buckets. And so, Howard, so go ahead, ask, and maybe we can clarify some more.
Yeah, well, you mentioned something that I think is extremely important, and that is confidentiality. Is it automatic, or as an ombuds, do you? Is it wise, or is it required that you let someone know that the conversation is confidential?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, and I start every meeting I have with a visitor by saying that this is confidential, and then there's a few narrow exceptions of that if there's a risk of imminent harm, but generally speaking, it is confidential. So yeah, and to me, that's the most important thing about the office, confidentiality.
Great.
Yes.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, and that's in all. And then I'll just add to that, like in addition to like telling people that one-on-one, like it's in all of our materials, right? You're gonna, people are gonna read about it on our website. It's gonna be in all of our brochures, posters, whatever we're putting out there. We're gonna go through, our standards of practice and how we operate. Confidentiality being one of them. One other thing I want to note before I forget too, because I don't think we touched on it. David mentioned, that we're not part of a formal process, right? So he doesn't even call it a complaint, right? Because we're not putting the agency or the organization on notice. It's not part of any formal. We wouldn't participate in any formal process if it were to end up in that space. So one of the things I always like to tell our visitors is, number one, we're voluntary, so no one can be required to use our services. And one of the really unique things about organizational ombuds is that when people come to us, unlike other resources on campus or within the organization, wherever they may be, is that they maintain control, at least of that next step, right? Because we don't dictate, and because of our confidentiality, we're not required to share or disclose any information they share with us, nor would we even confirm or deny they ever even came to talk to us, right? So they really can talk in a very candid fashion. We can explore all the options, and then they can truly decide and own what they want to do next. And it might be nothing, and that's okay. Or it might be one of the options that we talk about.
Wow. I kind of picture it. I don't know if you're noticing and you can see the screen, but I'm learning what to do as we're moving on so I can change the visual thing. But it sounds almost like you're as much, if not more, of an educator than anything.
A coach. We do a lot of coaching. I think, I don't know, David, if you'd agree, but I think coaching is one of the things that we do probably more often than not, either helping coach people through a conflict or a situation that they're trying to navigate, or coaching them in communication, framing conversations. A lot of times, and David, you said this, it boils down to communication. A lot of times there's a conversation that needs to be had, and they're either not having it or they're not having it well, or they're not handling it well, right? And so, like in our trainings, we always talk about conflicts inevitable. The key is, how do we handle it, right? It's neutral. It's not good or bad. How do we handle it is good or bad. So a lot of our work is coaching people on how to handle it more constructively and productively. So helping them frame conversations and giving them those skills, those tools.
Yeah. So let me now we've got a perfect segue into the next section, which is talking about the difference between a moderator. I'm the moderator here, and between a mediator and an ombuds. And one of the things that you're talking about, and I'd like to say that from my perspective as a mediator, my focus is not in getting the parties to settle. My focus is getting them to communicate. So in that respect, it's very similar. But as a mediator, I don't act as a coach. So I know that in our outline, I was going to have Liz start with this, but why don't we have David start with this? It's a curveball, David, and I still can throw one. I can't walk too well, but I can still throw a curveball. Why don't we have you talk about the difference between a mediator and an ombuds? And let me add, David serves in both capacities.
Yeah, thanks, Howard. They're both avenues you can use for conflict resolution. They're both informal. I would say mediation is more structured. Even though it's informal, it's still structured. Ombuds work, as Liz said before, can include mediation. One of the things we offer here at UNLV is a mediation practice, but it's essentially not a defined process as mediation where you have different stages. It really can be anything from somebody doesn't like their grade, somebody doesn't like the way their colleague looked at them, somebody doesn't understand why they got a notification. It can be really any issue at all for an ombuds, where mediation is usually two parties have a disagreement and want to come to a new understanding. But there is some overlap there as you're going. Liz, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying, I always think of it as one of our tools. So ombuds do a lot more than mediation. Mediation is a very small percentage of what we actually do. And I think I mentioned earlier, not all organizational ombuds mediate, and I don't think advocate and classical really would consider themselves mediators. But as David's saying, it is very informal. It's really more of a facilitated conversation. And as you know, Howard, there are so many different models of mediation out there. And I've done lots of different mediation trainings and lots of different models. And what I love about being an ombuds is I get to be creative and I get to be able to cherry pick what I like, from the different models and create my own Liz model, right? Create my own model for mediation and make it whatever I want. And that may vary depending on the participants and what they need and what they're looking for. It may depend on the situation. One thing I will say, because a lot of the people who may be listening to this who do mediation or have experienced mediation, they might be familiar with the participants in different rooms, mediator going back and forth, shuttling information or shuttling numbers, depending on what kind of dispute you're talking about. In my world, we're all sitting around a table, right, having a conversation. And I'm there to, help provide a process, help ask questions to clarify, especially because we do a lot of mediation prep, or at least I do. And so I know if there's a question like a burning question that needs to be asked, that's not being asked, I can prompt people, right? I can say, so-and-so, is there a question you want to ask us or a request you want to make, right? And help keep the conversation moving forward. So they can come up with their own agreements, and they truly do come to their own agreements. Nothing's put in writing. We don't keep any records of it. They are then own that. It's up to them to hold each other accountable to whatever they came up with. It's not getting filed in a court. It's not even getting filed in an office somewhere. It's literally doesn't exist once they leave that room.
Well, great. Well, Liz, why don't we, David, do you have anything to add? Because I have some additional thoughts.
No, I'd love
I
to hear
do have
those.
that occasionally.
I'd love to hear those thoughts.
My thought is that maybe we could start with Liz giving people an example of a situation that you would deal with as an ombuds. Now, you both work for universities. All right. So
Yes.
it could be an employee. Why don't we talk about an employee situation where someone might come to you? And why don't you tell us, without obviously going into exact detail of a specific situation, but a type of situation that you would handle and how you would go about doing it. And then we can ask David to also give an example.
Yeah, I mean, you already point out we work in a university, and again, just to kind of show, just to highlight some of the differences, even other ombuds who work within the university systems may have different constituent groups. So some only deal with students, some only deal with faculty, some only deal with staff. David, I don't want to speak for you. I'll let you jump in, but our office deals with any and all, right? Faculty, students, staff, parents, contractors, anyone who's got a university-related issue can come to our office and have a chat. And so given that, you asked about employees, and I would say based on our annual reports, which are on our website from the past couple of years, staff is the highest number of people we see are staff. And we have about, 3,000, 4,000 staff on campus. But typically, to answer your question, it could be a wide range of issues, but probably one of the most common things, and David, you alluded to this, is communication, right? There's a communication breakdown between a supervisor and a supervisee, right? Someone's really struggling with that tension. So they come to us to talk through how might they deal with it? How might they address it? And we can really, after listening and really asking a lot of questions, really try to understand what's going on. And often the person will say, I love my job. I love what I do, but I just cannot work with this person, right? Morale's tanking, productivity is going down the drain, relationships on our team are deteriorating, right? So we help them dig in. We help them uncover what they really want, help them think through different ways to address it, whether it's going through a formal channel, depending on the issues, right? If there's allegations of discrimination or harassment or other types of issues, we might point them into the direction of some of the formal channels and help them think through what that will look like and what the pros and cons of that will be. Or maybe it's something where they can address it themselves. And like I said earlier, we can coach them on how to have that conversation and how to bring it up. Maybe they're not comfortable doing that. The person's not approachable. They want a third party to intervene. We can offer that. And with their permission, and David, I don't know if David practices this way, but with their permission, if they don't want to bring it up to the other person involved to come to Ombuds, I'll reach out and initiate that with their permission, to invite that other person to the table, so to speak. But a lot of it is really about empowering them to not only make their own decision about how to address it, but then also empower them to address it themselves. And of course, in the worst case, scenarios, those conversations or subsequent conversations may turn into, how do we help them exit gracefully? Maybe they decide, this is untenable, I can't stay here, I'm ready to leave, I want to look at other options. We'll help them navigate that too and help them think through, what's their exit plan? What's their strategy? What are some other resources they could use to help them with that as well? So I don't know, David, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that really that sums it up. A lot of times, and there's a lot of different kinds of issues. So sometimes it's what I call a transactional issue where, a student has a debit in their account and they think they should have a credit. Where do they go? What do they do? Yeah. Sometimes it's more of an organizational issue. I want to reclassify. My supervisor is asking me to do work that's out of my classification. How do I reclassify? So it's not that they have a personal disagreement with the supervisor. They just want to help navigate the organization. A lot of times, though, it's what I call relational or interpersonal, which is, I don't think my supervisor likes me, or I don't think my employees won't listen to me when I tell them what to do, and I keep telling them to do this and they won't listen. What do I do? So that's really the range of issues there. And it really, like I said before, you never know what it is. It could be anything at all.
Yeah, truly anything. I mean, like some of the examples that come to mind, I won't get into them, but are things like people come about financial malfeasance or research misconduct, or we have a lot of grad students where their relationship with their advisor is not great, right? And it's really a tenuous situation, and it's really problematic, helping them navigate the system, maybe to change labs or to change advisors. Then how do they take their funding with them? How do they keep their research that they love? They got to find someone who's in that kind of realm, right? We can help them navigate that. And sometimes intervene, right? Sometimes going to a chair, going to the dean, and helping them have conversations to address it.
I got to tell you, I'm now understand what an ombuds does and how it differs from a mediator. You kind of act like a pre-mediation. It's like let's see how you can resolve this without getting to a more formal structure. So why don't we move on to I think our note is identify the most significant points. Share your 2 favorite value propositions. So why don't we start with David on that?
Yeah, I think first of all, what or not the value ombuds bring is that there's less pressure in formal channels. So a lot of times, if somebody doesn't like the way somebody's treating them, sometimes they feel the only way they can do something is to file a formal complaint. And a lot of times they don't even want anything to happen. They just want to be let it known. So that's one thing that an ombuds can do. The other thing is, again, give them that space to explore their options, somebody to help talk them through things. A lot of times I see people who get caught in a feedback loop with other people around them who are egging them on, maybe to do something that might be disruptive, but it's not going to be their best interest. So it's really good for them to get a third-party view of like, hey, well, what's this going to do for you? If you go file a complaint, if you do this, how's this going to help you? So I would say that's my top 2.
Well, it seems to me, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll get to.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Seems to me that for large organizations, it doesn't have to be a large. It could be 200 employees and whatever. So, for example, I've been general counsel for a number of different companies. Where we had thousands of employees, I didn't act as an ombuds, as a general counsel, but it would have been helpful because when you start having that many employees, you're going to have all kinds of personalities and all kinds of issues. That would be nice if those could get resolved before it gets to general counsel. All right.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah.
100%. Yes.
Yeah, that makes it so. It seems to me that general counsel should be supporting the role of ombuds. So what are your 2 favorite value propositions, Liz?
Yeah, so I'm going to just, since you've already kind of opened that door with general counsel, I'm going to go to one of my favorites, which is sometimes general counsel gets nervous about the whole ombuds concept because of the confidentiality. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Howard, because what you're saying is exactly right. People have often what we call the blue, or Chuck Howard has called the blue uniform problem, right? Going to HR, going to compliance, going to legal, is scary for a lot of reasons. And so they just don't do it, right? So the leadership and legal and in-house counsel is missing out on all that information, right? So with an organizational ombuds, because of the confidentiality and because of the way we can raise issues anonymously, right, we can protect the whistleblower, so to speak, right? We can help get that information to those people so you as general counsel can be aware of it, can start connecting the dots, before it blows up into something bigger and uglier. And so I would say, 2 things. One is that as organizational ombuds, especially those of us who do work across all constituent groups within an organization, we're seeing and hearing things, and we can kind of do that spot the trends, identify the trends, because we can see how, wow, this isn't just a staff thing. This isn't just a student thing. This isn't just a faculty thing. Whatever this thing is, we're hearing it from all across campus, right? And so we can be like, wow, this is a bigger problem that I think leadership understands. And right, we can connect those dots and bring that information forward, which goes back to the whole mantra of it's early, right? We catch it early. We can then help mitigate liability, both for the people involved as well as the organization. So every organization should love having an organizational ombuds because we can help them address it and mitigate liability before it becomes a problem.
And I think it's important to understand that you don't represent the organization.
Right.
You generically represent everyone within the organization. You're the problem solver.
Well, and even
Yeah.
if we can't solve the problem, we can at least surface the problem so the people who do have the ability to solve it can do so and can do so effectively. We can help them think through what
Yes.
what are some different ways we can handle this. We love, at least I love, I don't want to speak for David, being the thought partner with leadership. That's great. Like, we're happy to be a sounding board, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I'll stop there.
I wish when I was general counsel for a national education company that we had an ombuds. So back then it was, oh, there's a problem in Canton, Ohio, or there's a problem in Providence, Rhode Island. Howard went out there to do the investigation. And now today, you don't even use in-house counsel to do the investigations. You hire outside counsel. Well, by that point, you're halfway through the pass. You want to cut them off before the pass. It just makes utter sense to me. So we've got a few extra minutes. So I'd like to, you've raised another question that comes to my mind. And it's partly because wherever I've been, I didn't really know that an ombuds even existed. Well, in college, and this had to be in the Swedish stage, in the 1800s, because I went to college in the late 60s and early 70s, I heard of an ombuds. How do you let people know that you exist? And how do you go about doing that? David or Liz?
David,
who wants
go
to go
ahead.
first?
David
I'll
needs to
start.
go.
I really do like to get out there very energetically. Basically, I will table at any event. I will go anywhere. I'll talk to any group, pretty much do anything. If they want me up for 5 minutes or 2 hours, whatever, I'll be there. And I really do see that as something necessary because this is a resource that everybody needs. I think having an ombuds, this is another value proposition, but I'll throw it in now too, is really an investment in equity for the institution, because a lot of times, and this could be a private company, government, educational, whatever, the people who've been there for a while, who have friends in high places, have an advantage. And I see the Ombuds office as leveling that advantage because anybody can walk in here and get access to all that institutional knowledge. So that's why I think it's important. And basically, I just like to get out there whenever and however I can.
Liz, what about you?
Yes, everything David said, and I'll just to supplement, regular meet and greets, right? So we, on an annual basis, we, check our list of all the different leadership throughout the organization, different HR professionals and different units, that kind of thing. Are there new people? Are the same people there? But we try to do annual, just check-ins with those folks, just so that they can, just have some casual conversation with us before issues arise, right? That makes it a lot easier when there is a problem to go and talk to them. But also they can get to know our face and get to know who we are. We're approachable. We're there to help them as much as we are anyone else on campus. And really to serve as a reminder, right? The outreach, the in-reach, outreach, whatever you want to call it, piece, so that they refer people to us, because we rely a lot on word of mouth and referrals. So not only from our visitors, which is what we call people who use our services, but also from others throughout campus who may have never worked with the Ombuds before. We want them to know who we are, what we do, so they refer people to us. So regular meet and greets, I would say, is helpful. And we use social media. I know not all Ombuds are comfortable using social media. We have some social media accounts that we can then, we just try to, send out testimonials, reminders about our services, events that we have going on, we'll just invite people to, that kind of thing. I'm trying to think what else. But yeah, everything David said, presentations, tabling, workshops, brochures, Swag, people love swag, right? So always having swag on hand to hand out. So next time they use that mug or they use that tote bag or we just gave people a little like hiking kit. It has our name on it and our numbers. They can call us, because one thing we didn't talk about, I'm not going to get into it, but I'm just going to refer people to the International Ombuds Association's website, is that in addition to confidentiality, we're independent, impartial, and informal. So we're not keeping records of any of our people who visit us. As you've already noted, we're independent, we're not representing anyone, and we're impartial. We're not there to be an advocate for anybody involved. But we do advocate for fair process. So I think David mentioned earlier, when we get into like systemic process issues, we can push on those and try to help ensure that they are, being implemented fairly and equitably across the organization. And if the process itself is flawed, we can certainly raise that.
Okay, so how do people, well, that's probably isn't the correct question. I know that the American Bar Association is having a webinar coming up. Is it a webinar?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about it? David, are you participating in it?
I don't believe so.
Oh,
No,
okay.
Do you want
I'm
me to?
sorry. What,
I don't. I hate to hog, but do you want me to tell you about it?
Please, I'd love to hear more about
it. Okay. So this is our 6th annual Ombuds Day. It's on the second Thursday of October every year. So this year is October 12th. And yes, we encourage all ombuds to do something within their organization. But the ABA Section of Dispute Resolution is started Ombuds Day 6 years ago, and every year does some kind of programming. So this year it's a webinar. It's free. And for everybody and anyone. The guest speaker, if you will, is Dr. Thomas Zagambo, and he has been an ombuds for 26 years in a variety of corporate organizations and government organizations. And so, he'll be there to talk about his work and answer questions. And I don't know if you want me to give you the link to register, if you want to put it somewhere later. I don't know. It's up to you.
You can mention the link. I will put it in the comments section, whether I show this on LinkedIn or I show it on YouTube or wherever. It'll be in there so that who's ever watching this, if you're interested, go down to the link and register.
Definitely. So I'll just give it a shout out, but it's AMBAR, so ambar.org/Ombuds 2023. And that'll take you to the registration information.
Okay. So now, finally, to end this, let's start out with David to tell us how people can contact you.
Yeah, if anybody wants to get in touch, they can email me, david.schwartz@unlv.edu. I'm on LinkedIn, david.g.schwartz on LinkedIn. Got a website, dgschwartz.com, where I share my blog posts and articles and things like that. So I tend to be pretty accessible.
David is everywhere all the time. Yes, everywhere. You go on any social media, you'll see David all over.
Yeah, well, that's great. I'm a big fan of that. Liz, how do people get hold of you?
Yeah, I'm actually looking to see what my LinkedIn name says, but I'm on LinkedIn as well, so you can always find me on LinkedIn. If you search Elizabeth and then Schwartz is in parentheses Hill, that's me. And my email is elizabeth.hill, HILL, @colorado.edu.
Well, great. And again, my name is Howard Klein. All of this will show up on the final version of this. And in the comments section, you can get a hold of me at howard@tkgadr.com. And also the information will be provided in the comments sections for my LinkedIn profile, where you could actually see this. So unless there are any other questions or comments, it's quiet. Wow.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And that's a wrap.
Great.
You have a great day.
Okay. See you later.